Thank you for joining us again, everybody. Welcome back, Salt of the Streets. This is part 3 of our live stream for episode 130. My name is Donovan.
I am Colin.
And you have been watching us on our YouTube at Salt of the Streets.
Oh, hang on. I'm noticing a problem.
Okay.
Let me switch back here.
You're in the comments thing, so I don't know if that matters.
Oh, yeah. I can't. It's hard to switch back to that.
Okay.
Here, let's go back to this number. Doop, there we go. Hang on. I got to work out some. I'm not getting desktop sound coming in like we did last night.
We're still live. All right,
that was there.
Oh yeah,
we're live now.
Right,
so
well, that's fine.
Everybody, we're having some technical difficulties
yes, no,
here.
While we're doing that, thank you again for joining us. You've been watching us obviously on our YouTube at Salt of the Streets. We also have our Instagram, our Facebook, fuck Facebook at Salt of the Streets, and also our Patreon.com Salt of the Streets. Go to our Patreon, subscribe there, help us make more better content just like this. Also our book club, the newsletter, the beer shows, all these beautiful things that we're doing. You can find also our personal social media. I am at Salt of the Street on Twitter and at alpaca_Donovan on Instagram. Colin is at Big Bird Offie on both those things. You can find all this at saltofthestreets.com. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment to all these things, tell all of your friends, because I know that you love this content and we want to see more of it. So
word. All right. So, yeah, you guys got it figured out. We're having a little bit of sound issue here, so I'm going to switch back over, and then you guys just let me know when you can hear us. I think I might have fixed it, but we will find out.
Looks like there's bumping when you...
Boom. So right now I got no feed from the desktop audio.
What about that?
Got nothing from the desktop audio. Jake, can you say something real quick?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Okay, perfect. I think that'll work because we get...
All right.
Yeah, we're not showing up for some reason on that, but Jake's audio is coming in from the desktop, so I think that looks good.
All right.
I think, yeah. Well, everyone in the comments, let us know if it sounds everything. I mean, we can see it up there, so I would imagine that it looks...
Yeah, I think we're running.
That it's fine. So he said I can hear both now. So everything is good to go. Okay, so we are joined today by our friend Jake Lyons, right? You are over here on the other side of the screen. So, Jake, thank you for joining us.
Dude, it's very excited to be here. It's exciting. My first podcast.
First podcast, man.
Excellent.
That's awesome. Yeah, I heard you got some pointers last night from one of your friends.
Oh, yeah. No, I was actually just on the phone with him. Just to reiterate, I was like, okay, how do we do this? Do I need to breathe weird? Do you have like certain meditations you do before you go into these things?
Do you have a friend that hosts a podcast?
I have a friend that goes on quite a few, just by the nature of like his job and the things he does. He's been very helpful in that.
Awesome. So Donovan,
oh, dude, you're pouring the shillings. There we go.
I'm pouring it right now.
That's right. I'm on a sober kick, so I am not participating, but I am very, very familiar with the Excelsior Imperial Apple cider.
I'm not much of a cider man, but
I'm really excited to see your reaction here.
It smells real sweet.
It's real sweet.
It is, dude. Wherever I'm at in your like social hierarchy, it's probably gonna go a little lower. I understand that ciders are pretty much maybe the pansy drink.
This will get you fucked up though. At
real hard.
8.5%, right? That is
I limit it to 2.
Yeah.
Limit it to 2.
That does not taste like 8.5%.
It doesn't.
I can see. Also, it's vegan and gluten free. So if anyone is,
that's the beautiful thing about cider is you can get the wokest of your friends to drink it because it's just apples.
Tastes like apple juice.
It's legit, dude. It is a sneaker. You can accidentally drink like 3 or 4 of those and then get up and be like, oh, this is gonna be a rough night.
Yeah.
It's really good though.
Dangerous.
Yeah, especially a lot of people hate on it, but I learned from my original cider drinking friend back when I was introduced to like Irish cider. We were drinking Magners at the time. I don't know if you've ever had that.
I have.
That's a classic. Nice dry cider. It's a really good entry level, but it's poured over ice. A cider over ice is really nice because it kind of helps thin out that super sweetness of it.
Yeah.
It helps you like not get as bad a headache tomorrow.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, all the sugar, all I think there's tannins involved. I don't know what's going on there, but
it slams you.
It's like wine, you know.
Okay.
It'll get you fucked up.
All right. So Jake Lyons, we went to school together, elementary, junior high, and high school, right? Or did you go to CK High School?
I went to CK.
Okay.
So that's what I was talking to him about. I was like, I'm positive I keep calling you Donovan went to Oli.
Yes.
It's Olympic High School.
Yeah, so
for
we went
people who
to
don't know.
elementary and junior high school together, but we're still friends on social media. We interact, every so often regarding whatever. And you approached us a few weeks ago asking about coming on the show. You had some things that you wanted to talk about, and that's grown a little bit. We've added more topics and stuff like that. But before we get into that, just tell us a little bit about yourself, right? You're married and you have a kid, right? Married, right? And you have another child on the way, right?
Yep.
Right. Okay. So you're working on number 2. Excellent. So tell us more about yourself. What do you do for a living? What do you, let's start there. What do you do for a living?
Yeah. So I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. After got done with school, went to WSU, Washington State University. Go Cougs. Let's go. I have a funky, weird story there. So I'm probably one of the few people who didn't go there to party. So I did graduated well. Did 4 years with the shipyard. So people who aren't familiar with that, DoD, Bremerton Shipyard, was a test engineer there for 4 years. Did roughly 2 years as an HVAC plumbing tech, and now I work out in the Boise area as a facilities engineer.
Okay. And what sparked your move from Washington to Idaho? Was it just a job or?
It was a multitude of things. So I lived in Bothell for roughly 18 months.
Right there.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Bothell itself is awesome. It's a cute town. It's got some really good stuff about it. But I love Seattle. Like, I have so many good memories. I was one of the guys. I mean, you guys probably remember when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl and we had the crazy parade and celebration. Like, me and a bunch of dudes I could name that you would definitely know, Donovan, skipped that entire mile-long line.
Yeah.
And ran into there. Was able to see Marshawn Lynch throwing Skittles. It was beautiful.
That's cool.
There's that Seattle I love. I now call it the Green Gotham because that is what I have seen. I think is now the result of our largely progressive leftist politics, and we'll jump in this later, no doubt. But I think the base in which supports those political leanings, I think, is very weak, and is actually leading to some of the absurdities that we see today. And where it really cemented for me of why we moved out of Seattle. Yeah, I got a job out here in Boise. I had an awesome buddy who got me the job in Bothell. He's rad. Very thankful for that opportunity. But we had 3 emergency situations. One of them I'll tell you about. Leaving, and I had gone down to First Ave, so that already tells you where I'm at. I'm across from the Starbucks Corporation. And this dude, I'm buying some Toyota parts, and I was already I just recently gotten my concealed carry permit, went through some classes, some training, and worked with some guys I know that are just excellent marksmen and prior military. And so I'm not going there I'm carrying because I want to stay safe, not because I want to be a hero. But I'm down there, and this dude's unpacking his Toyota Tacoma in front of my eyes. The parts I'm literally about to receive, he's taking off the car.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you doing? So long story short, he was on his way along the coast. He had just quit his job and was trying to get everything out of his storage equipment or storage locker because the guy who was owning it was writing off all the theft and break-ins off insurance, and was just like, this is what I'm doing. I can't stop it. And the entire time we're talking, I was there for probably 2 hours. We were getting circled by 2 fully blacked out Chrysler 300Cs. Never got to see the probably not so gentleman in the vehicle, but he would point them out and was like, yeah, these 2 guys in their crew just come around here, break into the stuff, broken into mine multiple times. And yeah, this is how it is just along First Ave now. And I'm just like, this is crazy. And this is 3 months after we get rid of half our police force.
Oh yeah. So that's ultimately kind of what drove you out of the state. Is you feel like you were kind of driven out of the state. You wanted to move out because of the crime, just the overall social deterioration.
It just felt like, okay, I'm seeing the early, not even the early buddings, but the real evidence of hey, this is where it's headed. I need to get out of here. We had some really great opportunities here in Boise. And just for family building, it's just I still lock all the doors and everything because Seattle did that to me. But I don't have to. It's awesome. Our neighborhood's lovely, and we know both of our neighbors by name. We watch each other's dogs.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good setup
There
right
you go.
there.
Yeah.
Now, did you guys entertain any other states at the time, or was it kind of like job driven to kind of go to Idaho, or did you guys specify looking at Idaho in particular?
We had a few on our list. We Idaho was definitely number one. A big reason we moved down here was the friend I've mentioned. He and his family was like wooing us to come over. Like, hey, like this is where we're at. This is what you kind of can expect. And over the past 3 years, I had a really big theological shift. And him and his friendship and a handful of other gentlemen that I've gotten to know and be friends and be mentored by them have really helped solidify and just bring a lot more confidence within my own personal faith, but also in how your faith actually gets actualized to the world. It's in that not just this weird like it's just a spiritual thing that I'm going to believe and then I'm going to treat people like trash, but or however that manifests itself. And so yeah, just the community here was a huge call. Idaho was number one. We looked at Florida, but the humidity would have just eaten me alive.
Yeah,
Largely red states, though. Utah was another look. Salt Lake it's got some really cool areas, and I really like off-roading, so that was a definite one we were looking at.
There you go.
Okay.
You're a pretty big outdoorsy guy.
Oh, big outdoorsy guy, yeah. Yeah, I definitely. I enjoy the outdoors a ton. I need to get back at it more. I'm really trying to build. I've got a first-gen Tacoma that I'm currently building for business, but then the ability to go like just summer and winter, just go snow 4x4 and all that fun stuff. There's a lot of it to do around here, so I really enjoy that stuff.
Killer. Idaho seems like a good kind of like best of both worlds because you got a little bit of city action if you want it, but then you got a massive outdoor area. You go down south, you get farm country. You know, it seems like a really, I mean, it's a hot ticket item. I know for people that moved out of Washington, because it's so close, particularly. You got a really strong kind of red state government going on.
Yep.
Constitutional carry? I don't
do not know.
I don't know. I have to look, but very gun friendly.
Yeah, no permits. Like I'm able to carry wherever,
Constitutional carry.
except for gun-free zones, of course. But
Of course,
that's a whole other discussion.
We talked about gun-free zones earlier today.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the line that we set, or that we lined out there is, unless there is physical infrastructure hindering me from doing so, I am carrying a firearm. That's the only thing that will limit me from doing so.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly willing to accept, any type of potential ticket or anything like that as a trade-off for my family's safety. So,
Yeah, for sure.
So let's get into it. So you said or referenced that you had kind of a big theological shift, right? So expand on that a little bit more. Were you more religious now, more religious before, different religion? What is that about?
Yeah, so I grew up in a loosely Christian influenced home. My parents, one baptized Lutheran, other baptized Anglican. They did give me the weird opportunity at 7 years old. I remember having a conversation, which I don't think a lot of 7-year-olds have this, but I got done with like preschool or whatever, and I think I was going to a Lutheran preschool, and I did a play. Remember, I'm very emotional, more like emotional memory, if that makes sense. So I remember like the feelings and kind of some of the concrete memories, but I remember just a few of those things. And I remember just telling my parents like, "Hey, this place smells. I'm done. I'm done." Like sitting in these wooden chairs, these pews, and at 7, I was definitely not listening to any messages or anything like that at the time. But from 7 to 15 was just an acting atheist. Like I wouldn't have like the knowledge base to necessarily convey like, oh, this is atheism, but acted as though, hey, if there really isn't a God. I'm acting in I think the logical implications of there is no God. Baptized at 15, God gave me the weird just instilled all my best friends, strong Christian families. Like, they have their own stories and things, but for some reason, kept getting attracted to these guys and had 7 of them, and they have just been awesome brothers in my life. Baptized at 15, have the classic like emotional response to Christ. Woo, this is great. I'm gonna go to camp and da 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 da. Do that for like 2 years, then realize life's hard. Had I won't say their names because you might recognize some of them, Donovan, but we had a handful of suicides in our community back my junior year, so your senior year.
Yeah.
One of them I was very close with as a teammate, and that just rocked so much my life. It was just the apathy, the questions, the nihilistic outlook on life of like, okay, like if there is a God, why would he take my friend? Just these classic questions, but these important questions and these reasonable questions based upon my experience. But after then 18, being introduced through another church, and again, these 7 dudes continuing to pursue me, to encourage me, to hold me accountable to my faith and to my baptism. From 18 onward, I would say that has been the solid rock of like, okay, haven't wavered. I've had theological shifts within Orthodox Christianity, but that's where I'd say that was very cemented. So I came out of a very non-denominational background from 18, whereas in the past 2 years, I've now switched into becoming a Reformed Christian. And so think Presbyterian, think way back to the Puritans, we may get there. So Calvinistic soteriology, so nature of salvation, that's what soteriology is if you're just jumping into this. So there's a lot to unpack there, but have made that large shift, which in the context of Christendom, like what I came out of is very mainstream compared to the theological tradition I now am in.
So what is different about the way that you conduct your life now as opposed to 2 years ago before this kind of like hard shift into, not hard in it, it's not a bad way, not like a, but just this shift into a more strict theocracy? What do you think is different about your life now as opposed to then, before?
Yeah, I think a large, there's more of an impetus on holiness. And not in the sense that when we use that word today, one, it has a lot of negative connotations, and we just think like cleanliness or things of this nature. But know that, okay, God is, here we can some fun bits. If God really does have relationship with people based on covenants, and then the requirements of those, God will uphold his end of the bargain, because he's God, he said he would, and the majority of covenants he actually establishes with people are unconditional. But then in that relationship, like Ephesians 2:9, like there's nothing I can gain by my works, but now that I am a changed man because I love God, now I do good works. And so we can break into some of those things. I did bring the biggest Bible I have.
Excellent.
Yeah, I didn't know. Like I can barely fit it in my mouth, so I thought it was the perfect cramming.
Excellent.
Cramming thing.
There's the thumbnail right there. We got it.
There you go. Let me grab it real quick. So basically it came down to an attitude of like, okay, I looked at the fundamentalist groups and was like very looking at their interpretation styles, like that's very literal. But then I would look at, say, a lot of the more non-dom mainline evangelical Baptist interpretation, and it was so, I guess the word I'll use is like memorialized or symbolized, but it was taking things out of context and then trying to give, I think, largely the Christian church these applications, but that were just so spiritualized that it was really difficult to actually do anything with it. So a classic example that you'll see a lot is like, well, our Christian piety really, there's a large kind of thought within the Christian church today that like really our religion, our thoughts and our beliefs shouldn't have any impact on politics. So we'll jump into that, right? Where that was glaring to me because that one isn't consistent, because all beliefs will inevitably, and especially in our democratic Republican society, all our decisions and things that we're voting for are based on beliefs. So if you're a Christian and you do believe like Christ is ultimately king and has authority on earth, and that was established in his death and resurrection, then we don't get our marching orders from President Biden. You know what I mean? So like it's actually not we're not necessarily being conducted by these social hierarchies that we are experiencing today. We can jump into other fun things there. So I was looking at where I was at, and some things just weren't aligning by what I was hearing from the pulpit, what I was hearing preached from the pulpit, and these things and these things that preachers were saying of like, don't get involved here, or this isn't really where your faith gets applied, or this hyper spiritualization where that didn't line up with the biblical account and the historical account of Christians. Like, no, we're going to spread the gospel literally everywhere. We're going to take care of the orphan. We're going to meet needs. We're going to die to Roman persecution for 250 years. And so then looking at those as the historical model, being like, hey, that's not at all what I see happening today, at least in the American context.
Yeah, a lot
very
of,
maybe things like that.
yeah, see, a lot of times now we see like the deference of religion give way to, you know, the sanctity of the state, for lack of a better term. We've, you know, I think we've talked about it before. We, you know, the country was founded on Judeo-Christian morals and ethics and principles. I mean, there's when a society as a whole, I guess, kind of loses sight of those principles, especially via like a lack of religion, you know, it just turns into kind of like this secular, nihilistic, you know, just power shit show. And how do I want to put this? It's, you lose the why and you just focus on the how.
Well, I think so. Bilbo said one of our viewers, right, had this question for you, and I think Colin is actually explaining right now of do you think people who have no religion have made politics their religion? And I think that's like exactly what you're explaining, you know, is and I think that's a big debate. I know for sure, like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris have debated this, you know, like theocracy and what the secularism, you know, and the base and how people can find their morals in secularism, or if they have to find them through religion. And we've even talked about that here, that I'm not religious in any facet of my life. It's not, I don't disbelieve in any type of religion, and I'm not atheistic. I don't think that it's all made up or anything. I don't concern myself with it because there is other shit that I'm thinking about. So that's just not something that breaches even my bubble of concern, because there are other things that I'm considering. But I've also told you that when I base my morals of like right and wrong, or if I was to tell someone where to do that, I think a Judeo-Christian value set is a good place to start. Right? Even if you're not going to be religious, to base your morals off of those set out in the Judeo-Christian values, I think is a good place to start. You know, murder, treating people correctly, not fucking your neighbor's wife. These are good things, I think, that you can use as a base, even if you're not going to go to church and be religious. You know, that's a good place to start, I think.
Yeah, and almost by de facto, if you're following those, you're already following some of the basic tenets already. Of the founding religions, which is an interesting concept when you really think about it.
So what do you think about that, Jake? This question that his name is Bilbo Swaggin117.
Bilbo Swaggin.
He is one of our very consistent viewers. He is a great viewer of ours. So he is curious, do you think that people who have no religion have made politics their religion?
Yeah, so, or I've heard this term, they call it the religious nuns. N-O-N-E-S, the religious nuns. So this comes down to a concept that I've been holding to a lot. It's not, and I did not make up this term. And just so for anyone watching too, like, I'm just a dude. Like, I hope that's very clear. Like, I'm a Christian. I believe a committed Christian. Love God. I'm not an expert, so this is very much my opinions. But in the case of like the religious nuns, whether that's atheist, agnostic, just not holding to an ultimate transcendental power to ground their morality or their view of their morality and their view of reality in. Yes, because I think, and this is going to appear wokish at first because we have to use some similar terminology, but
we'll call you out if we need to.
Thank you. Whoa. They are operating out of a natural power structure. So this is what I think is interesting, and I'll get back to your comments here in a second, Donovan, is those who are ultimately going to ground, who maybe say that there is no God. And then it gets very interesting of usually that argument lands in, okay, well then I need to create my purpose. Because I'm not designed, I was not created with a purpose in mind. I am just the result of billions of years of a macroevolutionary accident that just happened to work out on this third rock from the sun that was just going around this moderately small sun and solar system that brought life to all these things. None of this was orchestrated. All, and we know the crazy probabilities. It's basically zero. And okay, well, I'm just on this rock. I'm going to create my purpose. But in order to create my purpose, power is absolutely necessary in that. Maybe ask why. Well, if you're going to try to manifest anything, create anything, and I'm talking just an ability to modify what's already given to us, well, you need power and the tools to exact that. And in our American context, the ultimate way to allow that to happen so that you can do whatever you want is to govern it. Because in our democratic Republican society, we put representatives before us, and as long as they say, because we have entrusted our societal powers to them to enact laws that would allow us to do these things. And so ultimately it is, I would say the non-religious person is actually practicing an organized religion. It's just based about within their own desires. And so, and that's going to look, which I think is funny within the woke crowd, while there's all these different desires and diversity within that, is they're all still doing the same thing. It's just this battle cry of, well, I just want this. I want this. And because I want this, I'm going to go get it. And the easiest way, not even the easiest, but the way I can do that not only for myself, but to have authority on others so they can't take that away from me, I'm going to do this through the government. And so, and then that trade-off is, okay, if I give over my power and you enact things that's going to allow me to do what I want to do, identify with, create, whatever, then I'll submit to that. And so, yes, religious nuns, I think, are ultimately right now in the American context submitting to the government. And I think that's why you're seeing such a rubbing between conservative Christians and just religious folk in general, or just conservatives in general, is because we ultimately submit to God. And so when there's laws enacted that we believe are objectively wrong, because we believe that a God created the world with purpose and gave human dignity and our rights are based upon that reality. So then, abortion, all these other things come into line. Then that's why there's that willingness to say, no, pump the brakes. Whereas maybe someone who is more on the religious nun side, and I know atheistic conservatives, so I'm actually really interested in that perspective. But that's not the majority. And so there seems to be kind of a bowing down to the state because it is I don't know if easiest is the right word, but it is right now one of the main ways that they can claim control and justify why they do things.
And I think, I agree with you a little bit. Let me push back on you a little bit. So I think in an American context, you're probably correct, because within the current system that we are existing in, that's the government structure. And I guess we can really only contextualize it within those two things, but we're a liberty-based show, right? That's what the whole idea of this thing is personal liberty, personal responsibility, personal freedom. So there is, I think, at very least a third aspect to consider this through, and we could take it from an egoistic sense, right? An egoism would be in which my right would be defined as whatever benefits my own self-interest, right? So my rights are defined with whatever I am defining in my right. And there is an inherent power in that egoism comes from a principle of might equals right, that I have to have the ability to attain whatever right that is, but that doesn't necessarily imply a power over other people, right? And the basis for that egoism could come from a communistic or anarchistic perspective. Both are similar in which you were talking about creating something, right? That we have to mix power with whatever we're given naturally. And the egoistic sense or perspective of this would be that power is my labor. It's not my power over other people, right? So my ability to self-actualize my own destiny in a world where I don't believe in God comes from my ability to mix my own labor with natural materials to create whatever I identify as my right and as my power. And so we talk about, does that make sense what I just said?
Yeah, I think what that's ultimately grounded in, where that gets really tricky though, is you're relying on ultimately your perspective's king, right? We got like your perspective of reality, your perception is ultimately subjective.
My definition of what my right is based off of what benefits my self-interest. So to a certain extent, yes, but I also, that comes, in my opinion, a base in natural right, in the fact that we are all human beings. We have rights, not because someone else has given them to us, but because by sheer fact that I am a human being, I have the right to exist. I have the right to self-actualize my own identity and my own purpose, because no one here has the right to dictate me any other way.
Other like than a humanist-based,
other than someone else's perception of what they think my right would be, and in a completely non-offensive way, your perception would be my purpose is whatever God has defined my purpose to be. And if I don't agree with that, I wouldn't accept someone else's definition of what my purpose is if I believe that it is self-actualized through my own right. You know what I'm saying?
Well, see, but that gets us back to this main question of like, then by what standard?
By my own standard. No one else has the right to define what that standard is when it comes to my rights.
Why?
Because no one else has power over me. You are equal to I am by the fact that you are a human being. You do not have power by any natural statute over me, other than if you're more powerful than I am. By like strength, you know what I'm saying?
That's the actual crux of it then, okay, so if I am born into a position, or say royalty, or what people are largely dealing with over the past 1,500 years. I mean, this is the claim of royalty, right? Like, I was born into this position and status, even though we're both human, but I have more power than you.
Yes.
Because I have way more accessible tools. So how are you unpacking that?
The difference...
why is it wrong that a king maybe hurts one of his subjects?
My reasoning for being wrong would be that it is immoral to impose your power on other people, right? Even if that's how you're defining it, it still is immoral, because it is infringing on other people's right as they're defining it. If I'm working within the bounds that you've created as a king, you're right. The base concept you laid out of individual right, my right being the same as the right of a king to a throne, it's the exact same thing. It is the exact same thing. The difference would be in my individual expression of that right. Unless I am infringing on someone else's defined right, it's not immoral. I'm not impacting other people. By a king defining the law.
Why is it not immoral? See, this is why we're going to get into like presuppositions.
Wait, why is what not immoral?
Because you keep you've had three main claims. One claim is it is immoral for me to infringe on someone else's rights. Why? Why is it immoral? Like, if I have the faculties, the power and the authority to, and can create my own rules, like, why is it wrong for me, especially if I have the power? That's why I made the king example, to hurt someone else.
And my response to that would be, because that is not how I define my right. My right is to not be hurt by you.
But by what standard is that wrong? Because
it infringes on my right. Because it infringes on my right.
By nature of being a human being, I have the right to exist, and therefore, if you threaten that right of mine to exist, then I have the right to push back at that point, because I do, as a human, no different than the king himself. I am a human being, so I have this right innate within me, empowered, endowed by whatever creator I might hold to. I am a human being, therefore I get to be one.
And what the king establishes in his kingdom in accordance to my right is foreign right. Whatever he's defining as his right is foreign right if I accept it as to myself, because I did not define that.
Mm-hmm. because he is
So-
also a human.
So this is what I'm hearing is two different things, though. With Colin, you ultimately grounded, and this is the point I'm making, you grounded the dignity of humanity in a creator. That's why. That's the underpinning, not just me making up my own rules.
Well-
because this is what I think, if the basis of our rights is just us setting our own rules, I think it's pretty quick to see why this becomes a problem. Because and especially if our basis is there is no God and it's really just a motive base of my rights or my emotions are going to be expressing or conveying to me what my rights are, well then, like in the case of a rapist or a pedophile, right? Like, well, I believe I have the right to be happy, and I'm happiest when I am, sorry for the folks listening, I'll try to be this,
No.
when I am very much infringing on another person's body in an adolescent.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, you just laid it out, is you're infringing on someone else, right? Is you can define it how
I'm grounding it in God.
but I'm not
That's-
grounding it in emotion, and that's what you used as the basis for the rapist. Because I'm not grounding in emotion. I'm not saying emotion. Emotion is impure. Emotion is fallible. Emotion will lead you to exactly what you're talking about. I'm not talking about basing things in emotion. I'm talking about right to live unfreely and unfettered by other people. And if someone is defining their right as being able to rape other people, they are, as you define it, infringing on other people.
Yes, but that is my standard is Christ. My standard is God. My Christ and those are laid out by Judeo-Christian beliefs.
But I don't-
ultimately found in the Bible.
And
if
I
you
don't-
rip that away, you're this idea of like, oh, I can just ground my rights in who and what I am. I think not only are you going to see evidence of like, okay, who cares what you set up? Because power will dictate otherwise.
And I think you might be conveying this to a larger governmental structure on like the scale of America, which is not at all what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about basing American law in individual people's identified rights. You can't have a system that way, and that's not how even egoism works at its base. If we are all defining what is right for us, you can't have an entirely a nationwide system that runs that way, and that's not what I'm advocating for. It's the opposite of what I'm advocating for. And that's why I'm saying is other people don't have the ability to define that. So inherent within that, they wouldn't have the ability to gain a position of power over me to define what my rights are, which is why the inherent position of a king is immoral based off of the imposition of his foreign right on my right.
Okay, so let me try to verbalize what at least I'm hearing. So within egoism, you're essentially, because I'm a human, and then this is why I want to get into, because there's a lot of assumptions that get packed into this view. You're assuming that just because you're a human, you have dignity. You have certain things about you that can also allow you to determine your own rights.
Yes, just as
Or-
every human being does, because no one can take that away from you.
Yeah, like
no
if-
one on this planet has the power to remove your ability to define your own freedom and your own pathway. No one has the ability to define that for you, even in modern America.
Yeah, and the minute you
Well, I would say
infringe,
that like a massive example against that's just slavery,
well, that's
right?
Which is
morally wrong.
which is an abortion against people's individual rights.
Yeah,
Abortion would
Granted,
not be allowed under when you're infringing on other people's rights, right?
Well, I mean, this is just the part of this is why I think within subjective, it's ultimately a subjective base of just people setting up their own rights. You're establishing
In the
your own
governmental
rights.
system, but that's why I think you're thinking about this in the wrong context. I'm
I'm
not
not
talking
thinking about a government. I'm thinking about individually. So you just take like even us, like, okay, like and I don't actually think this is how people necessarily get to these positions. If your argument is ultimately grounded in just my perception or my personal ability or view to create rights, like then everything that gets infringed on is immoral based upon so there's going to be things that people, because of their own personal rights or status and these other things that get coupled into that, there's going to be things that they think are completely moral based upon their perception, or to another person it's completely immoral based upon their perceptions and then how they've built up their own rights. That's ultimately a subjective morality, and that's not an objective, that's subjective morality, and that's not basing it in objective reality.
well, I think the problem lies in the fact that like we're sitting here talking about rights, and there's assumptions being made on what rights are. The problem with talking about like an overarching right is, you know, you're seeing it as anybody can make whatever rights they want, and that is inherently a subjective view. I think correct me if I'm wrong here, Donovan, but I think our view on rights is a much more objective a point of view. It is inherently moral to, you know, everybody has the right to exist. Everybody has the right to define, you know, to liberty and freedom. The minute you infringe on somebody else's right to exist in any capacity, you've then crossed a line into you've done something immoral at that point.
The moment that your definition of your rights infringing on other people's definition of rights, their base rights of their ability to define their rights, their ability to be a human being, that's the base moral of that.
Yeah, like there is no right to,
and that's where you're talking the example of slavery is the example.
But you're claiming that humans define their own rights.
Yes.
Okay. So if we are defining our own rights by nature of what we are, then why is it wrong for this is why I think it's not an objective thing. It's completely rooted in subjective. You're just claiming by nature what I am, I can create my own rights. If my rights are different than someone else's, and thus I act differently than someone else's, and they feel or experience that I'm doing something immoral, then it's actually not immoral. It's just a difference in preferences, because it's just a difference in your perception. Because you're able to make your own rights. Now, and again, like there's a lot of things I'm actually agreeing with you guys that I want to.
I think we'd probably have to have a more specific example of what that is, because if you're talking about my neighbor doesn't like that I step on his lawn and he identifies his right to not have someone step on his lawn as his right, then that's a very different thing than the large example you gave of slavery, right? These are very, very different examples that you're giving here. I don't identify. Someone else can identify it as their right to have their own grass that someone doesn't step on. That's fine. That is extremely subjective. That's not a base right to life and the ability to define your own. So I think we need more definitive examples to hash that out.
Yeah. So this is where I'll need to establish some like base questions, and I've got written down. So what is your view of reality?
I don't understand the question.
Like, can reality convey truth?
I think it can, but it's not necessarily, there's no rule to it. If reality is, our perception of that is extremely limited to only what we can perceive and we can intake. There's, you know, an objective reality is the fact that we exist and therefore we are. But a subjective reality is what you do with within whatever it is that you perceive. The fact that we exist in a three-dimensional space is a objective reality. How we interact with each other and how we interpret the reactions that we experience every day is our subjective reality. But I think, you know, reality is, what is that? I think, therefore I am. The minute I have self-awareness, I am grounded in a reality that I cannot escape from, because I live within the bounds of a carbon-based three-dimensional world.
You're jumping into the French philosophers and all that fun jazz.
Well, it's just, I mean, what is reality is kind of a broad question. I mean, reality is just kind of, it's whatever it is that I am doing at this point in time. I am alive and I am self-conscious of it, so therefore this is my reality.
So the point that I'm ultimately trying to make is that reality, for it to be objective, and this gets into our base assumptions, it needs to be uniform, moral, and rational. Or sorry, let me get that right and correct here. So if you're assuming that like reality is irrational, not uniform, and immoral, then we actually can't have any conversation about truth.
Digest that.
I'm sorry.
So if they're rational, immoral, and not uniform, we actually can't have a conversation about truth.
So let's take those one by one. The first one, it needs to be rational, right? That's the first one.
Irrational.
So an irrational perception of reality, I think, would be, within the mind of like a schizophrenic, where there is no, there's no coherent structure from second to minute to year to year. It's everything is just happening at any time. Maybe some of that could be rooted in like a simulation theory or something like that. But I think rationalizing that you exist is relatively simple for most people to do. Most normal people, I would say, can just rationalize the fact that they exist. What was the second one?
Uniform. So there actually has to be uniformity. So you could think of like there's preconditions to reality for us to even have these conversations.
And then I would just...
You mean like a set of agreed terms before we have a conversation? Is that what you're talking
No,
about?
not even agreed terms. Like,
existence.
No, these things must exist for reality and for us to even have a conversation.
I would say the best example I could give is and societally, as a species, our best grasp at that would be the laws of physics. That's about as universal.
We're all subject to the laws of physics.
Yeah.
But even more so like things actually need to be sustained and uniform in our universe for us to even have speech, right? Like there has to be a certain constitution to space and matter, and to the fact that you guys are even hearing and listening to me right now.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Is a result of like ultimately grounding this in God, but our reality is constructed in a way that we can even have a conversation like this.
Well, and on a scientific level, let's just say the mass of material that eventually, through gravitational forces, collected in this third ball from the sun around the perfect temperature sun that has, some level of relative uniformity given the span of a human lifespan to sustain something that can create the carbon-based life that we can recognize. It's the uniformity of the mathematics of the universe.
So, and like this is the gears that I'm trying to lace together is, okay, so you have to first have an understanding of reality and those preconditions that even make reality. This is for people just watching, like this is going to be a lot of this probably flying over people's heads or stuff that I totally understand, and I am just new to these conversations. But there has to be a meshing between, objectively, this is how things are, and then how we're perceiving those things, that the tools that we are even interpreting things through are reliable.
Okay.
Right? So our senses, the fact that we have eyes, the fact that we can see things happening. This is where I'm trying to point out that the very thing that you're seeing or you're applying is like, no, these are human rights, have preconditions, have presuppositions that they're built upon. And there's a certain assumptions every human is making that are established for us. So like we actually need to, we're assuming, okay, there's this world, that there's things being conveyed to us that we can interpret and actually perceive and do something with, right? So like why does, or this understanding, like why does 99% of the planet believe murder is wrong?
Because we hold that life as sacred, I guess. I mean, depending on your perspective on life.
It depends on the way that they're defining what their morals are, because some people don't think that it's wrong depending on what the context of that was. So I know I'm struggling with...
And I'm talking about like the general innocence, not just like war, something like that, but like in general...
You're asking me why?
You're like, what was that?
You're asking me why do the people agree that it's wrong?
Yes, largely. And I'm not grounding that in that, like, because people agree it's wrong, thus it's wrong. That's not my
would say that it's because it's taking the life of another person. You're removing someone else's ability to do what they want. You're taking their freedom, their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, because you know what it's like to be alive, and you know that when you're not alive, you're not alive. And so, objectively, life is good because existence is justified by life. And so for a fact that if you remove somebody's life, that is, everybody has a fear of death. And everybody that's alive in some capacity, I mean, I guess, religious afterlife and so on and so forth, has a fear of death in some capacity. You know that it is the difference between being alive and being dead. Objectively, it's better to be alive.
Yeah, I think even that, like, you could make an argument of just like that's not necessarily what like nihilists believe, right? Like, but if you're going to make an objective argument, like, no, it's better to be alive than dead. Well,
They don't kill themselves every day. I mean, people walk around identifying as nihilists. They don't all kill themselves. People identify as a nihilist.
This is the point I'm trying to make, is I think they're being inconsistent. I don't think they're actually consistent with their view of reality. I think if they're acting as though they have dignity in life and that these things are important, but they're grasping onto this view of like, okay, well, if really there's no purpose and there's no hope, then what's the point of life? Like, and I don't want to speak for every nihilist, but like generally that's seems to be the tone, right? Like, okay, objectively, if you're gonna make the claim objectively, life is better than death, a nihilist is not consistent with that objective reality, right? You'd have to say they're being inconsistent, because if they're consistent, if there was no point to life,
I don't know. I can't speak for someone who's a nihilist. I don't live in that mindset, so I don't know what the justification would be. But if I have to assume if what you're saying is correct, then they wouldn't be alive if they weren't able to. So I don't know. I can't answer that question.
Well,
from
I think
a
that would be the
nihilistic
logical
perspective.
outcome. Like, if you're truly nihilistic, and I've only met maybe one or two people who had these tendencies, then things actually do tend to be suicidal. Like, you actually, I think that, and I'll make one quick note and we'll jump back into it. Like, I think this is actually a part of these nihilistic tendencies is what we're seeing, like, with these mass shootings, like with all these issues among our youth, is because they're being told at the highest level that really we're all just animals as a result of this massive macroevolutionary thing, and we're just this giant cosmic hiccup that through billions of years of death and life, and we've somehow been able to go from single-celled organisms to incredibly complex human beings with minds. But really, we're all animals.
I don't know. I don't know what their perspectives are, so I can't
True, no,
rationalize as to why they're doing it.
This is the overarching secular scientific message that I think, whether we would say that explicitly or implicitly, you can derive that implicitly from that message. And I actually think that's why we're seeing that in so many, especially of our youth, which you see so many just general tendencies towards rebellion in general. But then if, like in the case of, well, okay, if there's really no meaning and my life is like not good, which is a moral claim, so we're talking about that, that's funny, then I'm not going to live. But I think what's interesting within that nihilistic tendency is their view of like, well, because I've been hurt, I'm going to go hurt others. So there's a lot of discontinuity even within their own view of like, because if it really didn't matter, like there's really no matter whether they do that peacefully or like horrendously.
Right, but the people who are willing to go out and commit mass murder obviously have some form of mental illness that they're dealing with. So I would say that they're probably not thinking correctly right off of the base if they're willing to go out and commit mass murder.
Yeah, and I would probably argue on top of that, like an actual true nihilist is at some level, they have some kind of mental illness at that point. If you truly believe nothing matters, then I would certainly,
even if it's just clinical depression.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it is that brings you there, if you're a true nihilist, in some capacity, you have some form of mental illness at that point, in which, would ideally be rectifiable. Because
so that's an interesting one, like with your claim, right? Like you're claiming it's mental illness. You're claiming it's wrong. There's something wrong with that. Why is it wrong?
Why is what wrong?
Why is mental illness wrong?
I did not say that was wrong. I never said that.
Well, I'm pointing to Colin. Colin had said, like, in his observation, and made a claim that like there's something wrong with them. Like, we're saying that mental illness is objectively wrong.
He didn't say there was something wrong with them. He said they had a mental illness.
Yeah, as far as nihilism being a mental illness, deeply rooted nihilism, you can look in, it's something like that. If you truly don't believe that, life has any meaning or purpose, there's only two paths to go down. And one is to try to find purpose in it and then get out of your nihilism, which, is definitely not a healthy way to move through life. But if you
Well, so
truly are nihilistic,
I'll go there. Because again, there's another claim. You're saying it's not healthy. By what
mentally
standard?
ill.
That's from his view. That's from his perspective. But
Okay,
yes,
so then
you're
someone
asking us
else-
questions from our perspective. I'm not sure how else you'd like us to answer it outside of our perception of what you're asking us. Because he didn't say there was anything inherently wrong with being mentally ill. He said that person is mentally ill. I suffer from depression. There's nothing wrong with me being depressed. And that's not what he said.
No, so like but there is an implicit claim there, like, and that's what I'm trying to draw out.
I don't think that that's true. I think that might be your perception of what he said, but there's nothing in what he said that indicates that there is an inherent wrongness with being mentally ill. He didn't say anything of the sort.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being mentally ill, but you can recognize that being mentally ill is a thing.
And that might be the part of the reality that factors into the way that they're perceiving things that they're going through.
Yeah.
So, but again, like the trump card in your guys' view is ultimately it just comes down to your perception, right? Like really, it just comes down to your perception whether something is right or wrong.
I'm not sure how you're deciphering that from what we're saying. We're not saying anything is inherently right or wrong. We are saying someone can be mentally ill, and that can impact the way that they perceive their reality to make them feel as if there is no hope. I'm not sure where you're getting the inherent right and wrongness from that.
Mm-hmm. I feel like you're trying to drive to something through asking those questions. It might just be better for you to kind of like just go for what it is that you're trying to state.
Yeah, so this is what I think is difficult. Is at least from what I'm hearing, if everything appears to be grounded in a person's perception, but inherent to that, if everything is just grounded in your perception, and then ultimately, like what is good or evil or moral is just based upon what you have made up. So autonomy at the highest level, man's law. Man establishes law for themselves. Then there's nothing inherently wrong when two people with different preferences and different laws, or whatever they set for themselves that are different, but they oppose one another in some fashion or form. So like war, right? Like we can see that there's so many things with war that come down to needs, and that people go over to war over their needs. But if it's but there's something immoral about going to war over perceived needs. So the point I'm trying to drive home is I don't think you can establish rights on any moral ground, and that you're trying to build is my claim against this egoism idea. Because if everything just falls onto man's law or man's perception, man is top, and there's nothing outside of man to establish laws objectively, then it's all subjective.
And I also never claimed that, right? I said that egoism is based in natural right, which means that naturally, based on being a man, there is a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you can disagree with whether that right can be instilled in someone without a God. That's fine, but that's at the very base. That's outside of how we're defining morals and rights. We have inherent natural rights, and based off of that, with those things, I, as an egoist, can define my right for what it is. When I begin to infringe on other people's natural rights, I'm committing an immoral act. I may not see it that because I'm infringing on their rights. That person is telling me you are infringing on my rights. This is immoral.
So you're
if I'm infringing on someone's natural rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? At those things at the base, and I begin to construct my egoistic right based off of that, and I begin to give myself rights that infringe on someone else's natural rights, that is immoral.
No, so now we're getting to like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. What are those based on? So like that's what I think is interesting is, so life, why is that the base that we have to start on? Why are those inherent to humanity?
Well, let me turn it around and just ask you that same question. How would you respond to that? What do you think that would be based in?
Okay, so like just frame it one more time so I want to hear it as well as I can.
What is your,
what's your base right? I know, where do your rights come from? If not from the fact that we are all equal at the base of being man, where do your rights come from?
Well, where does that assumption come from? Like that, see that you're assuming that we are all equal in man. Why?
What would make us unequal? At the base, what would make us unequal?
when there's the strict, like, are you talking strictly like just we're all human, like I'm born into this world and we're all going to be babies, like in that sense? Well, the difference would be status. The difference would be what you're born into.
In today's structure, yes. You're talking about you're setting out a premise and giving it the implication of modern day, which we are not doing. We're not talking about that. That's why I presented this as a third option outside of the American context, because that's not what we have here, and that's not what I'm presenting to you.
Well, I don't think you're completely outside of the American context, because you're basing it on life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
No. That is also how America was founded, but that does not mean that's the only way that it can be interpreted is through an American lens, because that's how the American founders decided how this country was going to be based. That doesn't make it inherent. That's based in John Locke, which was way before America.
Interesting. So John Locke is a
what?
Well,
that's fine.
That's
fine. The base there, that's fine. The point still is, it is not strictly within the American context because they are based in the same three principles of natural right. That's my point.
No, but I'm saying that like John Locke, father was a Puritan, comes from a long line of Calvinistic thought, and this ultimately grounds us back to John Calvin, found in the Reformation, is what they're grounding it in. This is our difference. Like, because there's going to be a lot of things we actually agree on, but this is where our main difference is. You're grounding it, well, by nature of what I am, I make my own rights. It is subjective by nature, because your rights are dependent upon you. And thus, if I'm hearing you correctly, when you infringe upon someone else's self-determined rights, that's what makes it immoral. Is that fair?
I guess, man, and this is where we need to get into more defined examples. That's why I was talking about lawns and shit like that. You know, if you're talking about your lawn, that's not based in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's not in a core humanistic right. That
life and pursuit of happiness. Like maybe I like my lawn. I'm happiest when people don't step on my lawn.
And that's fine. At that point, we would need someone else to help us arbitrate that difference.
Why do we need someone else?
Because we've reached an impasse where we don't agree. And if we're going to live cohesively next to each other,
that's where things get like objective. You're looking outside of yourself to establish what is moral. You're looking to someone else and their perception.
Nope, I'm looking to someone else to help us resolve this issue so we can move forward in an agreeable fashion. At that point, we have reached an impasse on who is right or wrong. If that's how you're going to define your rights, I don't have a right to tell you that isn't your right. I don't interpret it that way, but if that's how it's going to be, we want to live cohesively next to each other, then the best thing for us to do is to find a third party.
Why do we want to live
cohesively with each other? Because we're living next to each other. If we don't, then one of us will move. The example I laid out was neighbors, right? And someone steps on someone else's grass. And if you're defining it as your right to not have your grass stepped on, and I don't agree, I define it differently. We've reached an impasse if we would like to continue down the path of amicable neighborhood, right? If that's what we want, then the best way to resolve that is to find a third party, probably made up of multiple people, not to tell us what is moral, but to help us find an amicable way to resolve this dispute.
See, I think there's an implication there that whatever you're defining as amicable, like that's something we both desire.
But something we both agree on.
Okay, but like maybe we don't agree on it. Then so how do we settle it?
Someone should probably move.
Because it's not going to end well at that point.
It's not going to end well. So someone should move. If you care more about your grass not being stepped on, then you should move. And if I care more about being able to step wherever I want, then I should move. Or else we are infringing on each other's issues and something bad is going to happen. It's going to result likely in some type of violence. Why is violence bad?
Why is that bad?
Why is violence bad?
Yeah, well, like in that scenario, like again, because if I am holding my rights, I've defined my rights as the top thing.
Again, and at the base of that is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if you start to infringe on my base rights by hurting me, that's not good.
What I'm saying is like, and I must be not speaking or getting to that question, is like, why is that the standard? Why is life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness the standard?
That's what I did. That's what I identify as the standard. I don't know what to tell you.
See, I think this is the point that I'm trying to make, though, is that everything just keeps coming to your perception and your standards and things that you're setting upon. If you're dealing with someone who doesn't have
as opposed to your standards?
No, I'm saying that there is an objective standard. that there's something outside of both you and I.
So what would that be? So this is obviously what you're getting at, right? You're doing, you're getting at this thing. You're asking us questions where you know the answer. You're trying to pin us into a corner to deliver this final thing. So what is what you're getting at? Because I don't agree with the premise that you're presenting. It sounds like what you're presenting is God will be the determiner of these values, which sounds to me just as subjective as what I just said.
No. So yeah, let me flesh that out. So in the Christian view, and not all Christians are necessarily saying this, is that God is the infinite point that all finite things reference.
Okay.
So he is the ultimate grounding for everything. And so he creates a reality that is uniform, moral, rational. That reality can convey truth to us. I got my notes. I'm going to just convey them real quick so I'm getting this as clear as I can. And he's actually given us the faculties that we need, reliable tools, senses, logic, a mind to rationally process things so that we can actually understand truth. And these are the contingent things, is that we actually need a uniform...
I have to ask you, because you're saying he's given us this stuff. How do you know, if that's your base, how do you know that he has given us these stuff? I don't understand how that can be a justification where you're saying your rights are defined by what someone else has given you, when I don't understand the premise that you're laying out here, how that's consistent, more consistent than someone else saying the base right is my ability to live and be happy.
Because again, like even what is happy is, you have to define what is happy, and if you're ultimately grounding of what makes something, what is happiness, and it's just due to subjective, your subjective view, and that's going to vary greatly among all different types of people, and then that's going to naturally, and we see it all the time, cross paths with people that are going to have different forms of happiness. Maybe what makes me happy is, being a pedophile and committing those atrocities.
But see, when you go to an example like that, it immediately infringes on someone else's ability to be happy. Me being raped doesn't make me happy. I would be hard pressed to find a child who is happy with being raped.
You have two people trying to become a CEO. Both what would make them happy is becoming the CEO. One becomes the CEO, and I don't think in this case it would necessarily matter how they got there. Just say one becomes the CEO. And that infringes upon that man's right of happiness of, what was going to make me happy was going to become a CEO, and this other man took it.
Well, because the right is the pursuit, not the end.
The end goal of happiness.
No, it's so that you.
So
can
I
have
apologize
the
if I
freedom to pursue
misspoke.
that.
So I apologize if I misspoke. But again, that would be the one time that I didn't say the pursuit of happiness. So I think that we should be charitable with each other. If that's the only time that I've said that, then I think that it's pretty safe to assume that I mean what I said the other times, right?
So let me ask you
this,
Jake.
And I'm not trying to like dig at that. That may have just been me not fully understanding. So
we don't do gotcha stuff. We're not going to ask you a question to try and catch you in something. We don't do that here. So that's not how we present our conversations. That's not how we say things.
No, what I'm trying to ultimately present is that reality, for us to make any moral knowledge or truth claims, reality has to be objective. And necessary things for reality to be objective, for us to even derive truth, meaning that we actually have to be able to recognize truth. So we have to have these certain tools that would allow us to recognize that, whether that would be, primarily, in this case, I think the mind, the ability just to perceive things. So it's not eradicating this idea of like the importance of perception. It is more of establishing what are the preconditions that have to be right for us to even interpret something correctly. So Jordan Peterson captured this really well, I think in the Joe Rogan podcast, where they're talking about Joe's very skeptical on the whole Bible stuff. He says, well, is the Bible truth? He's like, no, the Bible might be truer than true, because it actually gives us the conditions in which we can actually interpret something as good and evil. What is the standard by which these things are evil? Because everyone is operating off some standard. So that would be claimed. We're all operating off of some standard. What makes that standard right or wrong? And that's the point that I'm trying to make to land here, is that if everything is ultimately rooted in just we are what we are, but when we can build our rights off of whatever, then there really is no right or wrong. And so the models that you keep presenting of like of like people disagreeing on something and then figuring it out in some quote unquote good way. That's right.
I didn't say good. I said amicable. I didn't say good. I said amicable. I did not say good. I said amicable.
Okay, amicable. Well, again, but like, why, in that situation, if we've established our rights and we can create, like, why would we want it to be amicable? I don't see the connection.
Again, in the situation that I laid out, you have two neighbors who have decided by the inherence of them being neighbors, they would like to be neighbors. They would like to live next to each other. In that, it's inherent in that because you live next to each other. Unless you accidentally...
I don't think because you live next to someone, you automatically have a similar standard.
I didn't say that. I never said that.
Okay, but you're saying that it's inherent. Okay, I move next to somebody. Now I just want to be naturally amicable with them?
That's not what I said. I said if you live next to someone, you have to want to live next to them.
Not necessarily. Like
if you move there, if Colin lives somewhere and I choose to go there, right? Because again, we're not talking about American societal implications. We're talking about base examples, right? Two people, and when you talk about problems, disputes, you have to give it other context, and that's why I start to go into policy.
And I'm not trying to make it bring it back to American context.
That's like, how I get into the resolvement of disputes between multiple people, is because you're giving it the context of people living in societies together, right? And I'm talking about, when you're talking about base and rights, we're talking about individuals. You are then giving a context of people living next to each other, and how does this imply in this, and how does it go to our structure as America? We're talking about different things. So when you ask me for an example, and I give you the example of two people living next to each other, right? Mm-hmm. If one person lives somewhere and I'm going to go and build a house next to the other person, I'm making a conscious decision to live next to this person, right? Yep. So, okay, in that, we have amicably decided to live next to each other. If I start to then, someone chose. You had to choose. If it wasn't amicable, then I would come out and say, get the fuck out of here. You can't live here. It's then unamicable. I didn't lay that out. That's not the situation we're existing in. One person lives somewhere, the other person chooses to live there with the express knowledge of the other person, and he chooses not to do anything. Let me be as specific as possible. Colin lives somewhere. I am going to go and move somewhere. Colin knows I'm going to move there. He doesn't express any issue at all. We have amicably decided to live next to each other. He knows I'm going to live here. Colin begins to step on my grass, which I don't like. I tell him it infringes on my rights to personal happiness that you are stepping on my grass. Colin says, actually, it infringes on my right to personal happiness for me to be able to do whatever the fuck I want, step wherever I want. We now have an issue. If we would like to continue to amicably live next to each other, the best way for us to solve that issue is going to be to try and find outside third parties, likely in the form of multiple people, that will help us find the most amicable, based off of a group, of an objective group like you're talking about, as objective as possible, to help us decide.
Objective. That's just a group of a bunch of individuals.
As objective as possible, I said, right? To try and help us decide the most amicable way for us to move forward if we would like to continue to live next to each other.
See, but like you're claiming that it's objective, and it's not, and I don't believe it's objective.
I said as objective as possible. I said that.
Okay, just because you claim as objective as possible, again, you have to, what is objective? What is out? So you're putting in the case of like two people amicably living.
Unbiased third parties who have no stake in this situation other than helping two people that maybe they don't even know resolve an issue.
That's not inherently unbiased. Like just because, again, because they're going to drag in all this experience, they're going to drag in what they believe is right and wrong. Why? Because you're defining it as I can create my own rights, and I'm defining and building up my own view of myself.
And that's why this doesn't define our rights. It helps us find an amicable resolution to this issue. I'm not saying they define the rights. I'm saying they help us resolve this issue amicably. Neither one of our self-defined rights change. That doesn't change. If we would like to continue to live next to each other, we need to find a resolution, and those people will help us reach an amicable resolution, regardless of their bias, regardless of whether, and if they don't, then the best solution is to find another group of people that will help us find an objective solution, an unbiased, whatever word you want to call it. An amicable is the best way, an amicable solution. That's the word I'm going to use, amicable, where we can both agree with that outcome. So
is
remove
amicable-
objectivity, remove bias. It doesn't matter how biased or objective they are. They could be so objective that it hurts, but if they help us reach an amicable outcome, then it doesn't fucking matter to me. As long as they can help us reach the amicable outcome, that's what matters.
What are you defining as amicable?
Where we both agree, because we are the ones with the dispute.
But would that mean that I have to set down my rights?
No, because it wouldn't be amicable, because you wouldn't agree to someone infringing on your rights because they're your rights, because that's how you're defining it.
See, but like this is where I think it's like difficult to parse through. Is like you're saying amicable is like both are going to be able to exercise their rights.
No, I'm not. I'm saying both people agree. They agree. I do things all the time that I don't want to do. I agree to do it. There is a difference there. I do things all the time that infringe on my rights. I agree to do them because it's the conditions in which I live upon. We can both agree to compromise if we would like to continue to amicably live next to each other. You're adding things in that I'm not saying.
Right, but like inherently, if we're going to live amicably together, then we need to also set down part of our rights.
We need to compromise to find an amicable solution. Yes, compromise.
So, but a base of theirs, like there would seem to be an inherent desire to be amicable. Are you saying we should
if
be
they
amicable?
still want to live there? Yes. If they still want to live there, then yes, you have a desire to be amicable because you don't want to move.
Okay, so I'm trying my best to operate within this hypothetical you've given.
Okay.
And sorry, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I think my settings came up. And this just might be honestly the cap of what I know, and I may just be misunderstanding you. I think I'm seeing difficulty in this situation is like, okay, so I frame this out. So you have two people, guy moves over there, and in that, are you saying that they are like by him coming and moving, like there is this natural, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to understand.
Then you can ask me whatever you want. Ask me whatever you want to try and qualify the situation.
See, I guess I'm just not seeing the necessity of why, if they define their rights as such, that they need to be amicable, even though they live with one another, and why that needs to necessarily end amicably, or why that forces them to move away if it's not amicable.
Because if it's not amicable, then someone's right is being infringed upon by the way that they're defining it. So it's gonna make me unhappy. If I'm defining it as him infringing on my right, I'm gonna be unhappy about that. So you either move or you continue to be unhappy all the time. So you don't have to move. You can accept the infringement on your rights and be unhappy about it. But I don't know why anyone would choose to be unhappy in a world where you don't have to, because that's not what the situation is.
It would be inherently better to try to resolve that situation
then
where
continue
both
to be
parties
unhappy.
can compromise.
There's
and
another moral
satisfy.
claim, right? Why is it inherently better?
Because then someone is unhappy and someone is not. It's better for both people to be happy than one person to be unhappy and one person to be happy.
So this is why I like where, but that's, if I'm understanding this correctly, and why is that better, especially if it's just based upon perception?
Because they both have the natural right to the pursuit of happiness. And if one person is unhappy, then their natural right to the pursuit of happiness is being infringed upon.
But if
that's
you're
not
saying
good.
If we build up our own rights, you're saying you have this inherent right, but we build up our rights.
Yes, I said you have natural rights. I already said this. You have natural rights, and past that, you have egoistic right, in which you are defining what your rights are.
Okay, this might be where I'm having troubles. And what establishes your natural right?
The fact that I'm born here. The fact that I am a human being. I am alive. I have natural right. I am a human being. That is what defines that.
Okay. So you're establishing it as like just the objective fact that I live here. But see, that's where I'm seeing like...
Not live here, just live.
Nope, that I live. I am alive.
Yeah.
You're alive, you exist on planet Earth.
Yes.
So by the objective fact that you live here, so that's where I'm seeing
Not that I live here. I live. That I live. I am alive.
Yes, I'm sorry. When I'm saying live here, I'm not talking about the context of the hypothetical. I'm just talking about I'm on Earth. I exist.
Okay.
Not trying to
Okay.
add back into the hypothetical in that way. Okay. Give me one moment. Okay, so by nature that I just exist, I have rights.
I have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Because and are you narrowing this to just being a human as well? Like, because I'm a human.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I can't put myself in the brain of a dog or a deer or anything like that. So I can't begin to try and postulate on what their rights or potential or anything would be. Mm-hmm. That's definitely, and I would acknowledge that, especially as far as the life of the animals or anything, that's where egoistic rights become inconsistent because, that's where you have to qualify rights of animals and man, and I'm not going to spend my life doing that. But if you want to do that, not you, but in a colloquial sense, then you can start to acknowledge that is where egoistic right is inconsistent, that you are infringing on the life and the liberty and the pursuit of happiness of those animals by your egoistic right to hunt them and sustain yourself. But I don't concern myself with that. And you can call that inconsistent if you want. I'm just not, I can't postulate on animals' rights and shit like that. I just don't, outside of domesticated animals that I choose to give the right to live and be happy in those things. It's not like I'm giving those rights. I'm ceding those rights to that animal. Just like everyday human beings cede the right to babies to live. That's like the same thing.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering how this isn't a circular argument. If A, then A, of like, okay, I have rights, I have human rights on the basis that I'm human.
Yes.
Yes.
Because of what I am, I have rights.
Right.
Where would you consider that?
Yeah, where else would it come from?
God.
Why does someone else why
can...
does someone else need to give you that right? That's what I'm saying, is I don't see why your reasoning is any more true or right than what mine is.
I think because you saying that I have rights by nature of me being a human requires your perception, right? Actually requires your consciousness, requires you to have these tools to even view that as a right. So
to recognize that I am human.
Let me pause real quick so I think I'm finally getting somewhere, and I'm just having so many brain farts, so I'm trying to unpack some things. Because you're claiming that the establishment of your rights is based upon you and your perception. Am I saying that right?
I guess I would not say that. When you start to give in perception, that's when you start to get into a gray area of people perceive things differently, and so the perception is when you get into egoistic right. Yes, but I think you're getting at natural right, and I'm not talking about perception and natural right unless you're talking about the way that I perceive that to define my own rights, which is a policy difference between you and I.
No, so this is what I was thinking. So you're claiming though, but like natural rights, that's an objective reality. That be your claim?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not really understanding in the way that everybody who is a human being has those things.
Yes. Okay, so you would say if you're human, you have rights. That's an objective fact.
Yes.
Okay.
I guess. I'm hesitant to use those words because you've used objectivity and stuff like that in this explanation for perception. So I'm not trying to cede ground to you inadvertently. You know what I'm saying?
No, so what I'm ultimately trying to drive home, and we may just be getting to the point where my brain is farting hard, and so hopefully if we can keep things amicable, I can come back with some more parsed out arguments to tackle this. I guess where I'm seeing what is hard is like, why is that objective?
Why would you say, do you believe there is such a thing as objective rights?
100%, because I believe in an objective morality that is ultimately grounded and constituted in God, that there is a source to reality.
Do you believe that humans by nature, just of existing as a human, have objective rights?
Yes, but it's not built up by my own perception of that or me.
Yeah, the egoistic rights are not in question here.
No,
this is the natural right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. This is your natural born rights. What you do to pursue that happiness is when you get into egoistic rights.
No, and like we're going to agree on that totally, but the grounding of it is what's different between you and I, right? Because I'm ultimately grounding that in a God who's given us these things, and that we have dignity because we're made in His image. It's not just because we are what we are. No, we actually have dignity, and we're separate than the animals, and this is an objective fact. And then we also act upon those. We actually, as humans, act like we do have these dignities. Not in all cases, of course. I'm just saying as an overall blanket.
So my response to that would be, what you're laying out to me is subjective. That is your interpretation of what is going on in this universe. You don't have any way to prove that is happening. So it's by that right. That's subjective. And I don't think that makes your rights, as you're defining them, any better or worse than mine are, because I'm not citing an absolute base root in the universe of that. Because we talked about this earlier in the show. This might be just a difference between you and I. I don't care about that. I don't care, because it's not, for me, it's not up to you to define where my rights come from. So it doesn't matter to me. And I wouldn't say it's not God, or that it's fucking any other God, because it doesn't matter to me. No one on this planet can prove that they are correct at the base of where their rights come from. The only thing we can prove is that we're all human beings, and that's the basis. That if we can all prove, then that to me is the core of where your rights come from. Because you can't prove that the Muslims are not correct, just like they can't prove the Jews aren't correct. No one can disprove anybody else's religion. So I don't even care about that.
I would say no. That is a false claim, because ultimately, would you say that truth has to correspond?
What is a false claim?
A false claim, as in that is untruthful, that does not correspond with reality.
No, I'm asking you. You're saying that is a false claim. What is a false claim?
Oh, sorry. The fact that we can't prove whether like my view or someone else's view, or a Muslim or Christianity, is wrong.
How can you prove that you are correct about your version, your interpretation of theocracy versus the Muslim interpretation of theocracy?
Well, okay, so we can even take it up higher than theocracy. Is like, do we just prove anything? So I think you actually nailed it. It's like, how do we prove anything? Like, sorry, I'm just trying.
Because I didn't say that. I said you can't prove that Jesus and God and your religion is correct and theirs is not correct. So I would love for you to explain to me how you could prove that. I don't see how that could possibly be the case.
Oh, okay, that's really good. How can I prove? So I actually think I agree with your position that ultimately we can't prove in the sense of like, yes. So like whenever we make like look at like evidence or whenever we look at evidence in order to prove, which that inherently requires interpretation, right? Like, so anytime we point to evidence, that is going to require what you assume about that evidence and what that evidence is revealing inherently includes interpretation.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, because I did say this is your interpretation of theocracy. So yes.
Okay. So now this is maybe the point that I'm trying to drive home, is which interpretation is correct on the basis of our assumed of our assumptions about reality and where reality comes from.
I don't even understand your question. I'm not sure what you're even asking me.
Where would you define that?
See, where my position ultimately finds is that we can't actually have an intelligible conversation. We can't know truth unless there's something outside of our reality that establishes things. So the established reality, or 3D, the laws of physics, the uniformity, that we need both of these things in order to even have this conversation. And that can only be grounded in a transcendental being. And then what that transcendental being expresses themselves in reality is the truthful thing.
So is your position that unless we are both identifying and accepting of the same theocracy, we will not be able to arrive at a truth together?
No, I'm saying that like objective morality, that there is an objective morality. And I'm honestly probably running out of steam here, just because like even my brain and my arguments, I'm a little running off. Conveys something to us, irregardless of our interpretation. That there are things in reality, like the laws of physics, these things that we are just subject to, that we can look at 2 + 2 and say, oh, that's 5, but it's not actually 5.
What morality
that gets us there?
What morality do those things convey that you have to identify, or that you have to align with a higher power? And if you're talking about moralities and you're saying they're objective, but you have to be subjective to interpret what those realities are.
So I'm saying all of humanity is subjected to reality. That we're not, that there are things imposed upon us that we just simply can't change, and that interpretation and our perspective does not change. And then that instinct, that does convey something to us. And that is actually the most truth. That is the truth.
But I don't understand that, because we all perceive things differently. So how can our perception, we all be perceiving the same thing but perceive things differently?
Well, okay, so like, well, I mean, this would then get into issues of like, is someone like a schizophrenic perceiving reality for what it is?
Probably not. I know there's a chemical misalignment with their brain, in accordance with the natural. I don't know. I'm trying to be very particular with my language because of the way this conversation is going. In comparison with the natural rates of brain chemicals in the standard human brain.
Anyways, so my appeal is that there are things even outside of human perception that are established, like the laws of physics. We can't change the laws of physics. We can't change the things that certainly oppose us. And
right.
Regardless of like, and it doesn't matter. Like there could be one person in the world that says, no, the laws of physics exist.
Right.
And he would be right. And everyone else could be wrong. Even
North is still north, 100%. And you're saying that based off of that, there are objective realities that are given to us through that. And so moralities. So that's what I'm asking you is, what are those objective morals that are given to us through the unchanged things in the universe?
Well, I think those and you've actually listed many of them, but where we're ultimately going to diverge is where and how reality even comes to be and where it's ultimately grounded in. So like in the case of, yes, I believe humans are born free by just our constitution of that's ultimately found. I'm trying not to screw myself up. That God has created us as equals, as humans.
But only some people see it that way.
Because if you operate off of that viewpoint, you're making an assumption that there is something before existence at that point. Whereas we're operating the point existence begins. That's, your existence as a human begins, and then you have inherent human rights at that point. Are the rights that we've been talking about: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That starts. I think you're insisting that there is a step before. We're starting at a point zero, and then you're saying that there is something inherently objective before that allows that to begin. Would that be similar? Would that be something that you could relate?
Unless, do we want to jump in like the cosmological argument? Because I think that's where that kind of naturally goes.
No, because we haven't even figured this out, and that's I've asked you, right, how you can prove that your being that is the source of all these things is the correct one and other people are wrong, because you've made that position and you've not defended that. I don't understand how you could possibly prove that someone else's religion is incorrect if you can't prove definitively that yours is.
So, okay.
Even outside of perception of facts, outside of anything. Regardless, you can't, no one, right, not just you, no one can prove, even through a perception of what the most of humanity would perceive to be the truth, no one can prove that their religion is correct or that someone else is inherently wrong.
No, I think you can, because of how it corresponds with reality. It's the correspondence theory of truth. Like, and that's not my ultimate, like, trump with this, but reality and truth correspond with one another because there is something that establishes those things. So this is where I think my argumentation is poor, is I'm not making that direct link, and I think that's just I'm just lacking right there right now. And so I would just need to go back and do my homework to be able to verbalize this more clearly to you guys. So that is on me. I'm going to own that. But can I write down your question?
Yeah, I want to know how you can prove, and I don't. You can write that down however you want. I would like to know how you can prove that your religion is correct and someone else's is not, because I don't see a single possible way that someone could disprove someone else's religion while proving that theirs is correct. I don't see a possible way for that to be the case.
So how does someone prove, and I'll try to use like terms, not just me, but like just anyone, right? This applies not to
No. I'm asking you because you said you can prove your religion is correct and someone else's is not. So I'm asking you.
Okay.
Because I don't see how that could possibly be the case.
How do I prove?
And you can approach it both ways if you want, but I'm asking you the question because you're the one here positing that position that you can disprove someone else's religion. So you can answer it either way, but I'm asking you because you're the one here making that position.
How do I prove that my position is, did you say right or true? What was your word?
I don't know that for this context it really matters. Correct, I think is what I said, but
oh, correct. Okay.
I don't know that the essence of the question is really how do you prove that your God is the true God and not whoever else identifies their God as the true God? I don't see how anyone could prove that. And that's why for me the basis starts, like Colin said, when we're born. I can prove based off of, and you can throw your perception, reality, everything that you want. So that's fine. We all are here as human beings. We accept that to be a fact. We are all here as human beings. And if you don't, then that's fine. That's what I can operate off of when people are born. I can't prove anything before that. So I can't talk about or even postulate where people's rights are instilled upon them before they're born. I don't have any way to prove that, and no one else does. So that's why my basis is when you're born, because that's what matters. Is when you're born, you're here. And don't extract it into an abortion argument because it's not that. This is
I want to extract in that, but I think what's interesting is there's that knowledge piece that you have to make certain assumptions that, oh, I am born. I am actually born. How do you know that you're actually born?
I don't know what to tell you, man. We're alive.
Yeah,
we're here. I don't understand your question because we're here and we are alive. We accept, as Colin said, I am here. I think, therefore I am. So I don't know when I'm just using the most basic thing possible. Again, I'm not postulating back to like abortion of like you're not alive when you're in the womb or any of that type of shit, right? Yeah. I'm just saying the basis of being alive, operating as a person on the planet, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in like how are you verifying that what you're experiencing
is reality,
is true or reality?
And I don't have any way to do that, nor does anyone have a way to prove to me that it is not.
Okay, so like even within your question then, like how do I prove these? It's not so much how do I prove that my position is correct, but how does anyone account for their position? And it's like, so like you're looking for this proof in order to give
because you're saying that. I'm only looking for that because you're saying it. You're postulating that there is a truth in which one person's religion is correct and the other one is not. I'm not seeking that. You're the one that's postulating that. You have presented that as the position that you can do that.
No. Okay. So I'm trying to present that there is preconditions for our reality and for us to even have a talk about this, or even for us to discuss proofs that it is ultimately has to be grounded in a transcendental God. So
right, and my question sprang from that by asking you, how do you know that your transcendental God and the way that they are defining or presenting your objective rights to you is correct if someone else's is different? If someone else in a different country who holds a different religion has found the exact same ending point that you have, but their third faction of a greater point, a transcendental point, is Muhammad instead of Jesus or God, whatever. I'm not trying to denigrate anybody. I'm not Muslim. I'm just trying to give examples here, right? Yep. How do you possibly prove that you are correct and that he is not if your morals don't align, but you're saying the exact same thing? The argument base is the same, but the practical implementation is different because of what your transcendental being is telling you objectively through your perception of reality.
Well, it ultimately would come down how are they supporting those claims, right? So you could say, oh, everything's ultimately grounded in evidence. So that would be the corresponding, that you actually need evidence to correspond to, like, to build up your claim and to authenticate that claim. My argument is not evidential, though, by nature. I'm saying that the very things that the things that you're saying that we're all accepting, no, like what we're really, because you and I could look at the same piece of evidence and come to completely different conclusions based upon our presuppositions. So what I'm trying to argue is that our presuppositions, that is ultimately, and if that is found in or not found in God, that's ultimately the thing that would make be able to account for your position. Because if it's not found in a transcendental God, and I'm not doing the best job right now, I realize that.
No, I think I understand the essence of what you're saying, but it also, to me, the natural ending, not the end, my natural ending point of that is what you're saying is still a perception. Like, you're still saying that comes from somebody else before that. And I don't think you have any way to prove that any more than I have any way to prove the question you're asking of, how do I prove that I'm alive? The same way you're telling me Jesus exists. I don't have any fucking way to prove that, just like you don't have any way to prove that. To me, an easier thing to verify is that you and I are both alive. We're both human beings because we're here having this conversation right now. We both agree on that because we both agree we're here having a conversation, right?
Yes.
Okay,
but
so
but that is an objective claim, right? Because you're saying this is how something really is.
Correct, and that's exactly what I'm saying, is that's where I'm basing my rights, and you're saying they have to come from before that. But you can't prove it any more than I can prove that I'm alive. But it's easier to prove that I'm alive than that Jesus is there and he and God gave me my rights. Because we're here and we're alive.
Yes, but that's not on the basis of you and I agreeing on something. So, like, that's where I'm
only asking to agree that we're here and that we're alive. That's the only thing that I'm asking for us to agree, because we can't agree that Jesus exists. We can both agree that we're here and that we're alive.
Yes, but why? So, oh man, yeah, I need to go do my homework so I can, like, answer this more thoroughly, because I just keep coming up to an absolute brain fart of a wall. And this is the crux, and that's why I'm really, like, stretching my brain, because you're right in that there really is no way to perfectly verify, right? To prove. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that position. But then we have to account all of this. Why is there objective reality? Why is this what it is?
And I don't think that we have to. I think that's the policy difference, is that I don't think we have to, because I don't do that. I don't concern myself with those things because I can't verify them. We can, and I'm not saying it's not valuable. I'm not saying it's not valid. They're super valuable. It's extremely valuable conversations. But in regards to the practical applications every day of my rights, I don't consider those things because I can't. And at this point, I'm talking off the cuff because I've not thought at long length why I don't consider these things. But as I think about it now, it's because I can't prove those things. And I can. This is the reality that I exist in. And that's fun to postulate about. And like I said, I think it's valid and it's valuable. I don't exist in that world. I don't think like that. And so to me, and maybe this is wrong, basing it in human rights, that's the base that I can verify. That's good enough for me. That's good enough for me.
You can't verify, right? You can't verify that. You can't prove anything. You can't even prove that we have human rights under your assumptions.
No.
So you have to assume them, or it's a claim.
Sure. I guess I claim that.
I'm not trying to.
No, that's fine. No,
just like really unpack it.
And that's fine. I don't. Because to me, I also don't live this lifestyle seeding that other people are wrong by finding it somewhere before this. That just doesn't matter to me. Like, that aspect of it just doesn't matter to me. So it's fine. It's good. And I don't know. You got to give me a little bit of grace. Like I said, I'm talking off the cuff at this point. It's good enough for me to agree that all human beings are equal and have a few base rights that will allow us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to me is good enough. And that doesn't mean that people shouldn't pursue greater answers than that or try and find what the true root of those things are, but that's good enough to me. And
starting at
So
the
sorry.
starting
Oh, go
line
ahead.
starts at existence, and then recognizing that we exist and we are human, so therefore we should have human rights. Asking why those humans' rights exist is the more theological question at play here.
Yeah, which I think is
don't-
valid.
yeah, and
it's just not me.
Yeah.
I just
you don't have to know why to act out.
yeah.
You can make the assumption that people having human rights is inherently moral. You can act that out without understanding why.
And I don't
Yeah,
feel
and
like I
so,
need a higher power to grant me rights to feel as though they are justified when I wouldn't be able to prove that anyway. I can't prove any more that I have these natural rights than someone else can prove that a God somewhere has instilled those rights in me objectively. And so I guess at the root, it feels like a safer assumption to say we're all, it's easier to verify we're all human beings, so it's a good place to start for us to all have those basic rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Well, you're not verifying anything, and that's the point that I'm trying to make.
And that's, I understand, that's
How
why I
are you-
said give me grace, because I'm talking off the cuff here. So none of these are
No,
very
yeah.
hammered down terms, No, I can't 100% verify anything. No.
But that is your assumption. You're assuming because we are humans, we have rights. And my point is, I think it extends further than that, because
And
people
that's-
who don't
and that's fine.
that don't hold to, because you're claiming that those rights are objective. If I'm like that's regardless of if two different people think so. Like
Those
here, let me
natural
ask
rights,
a question.
yeah.
How about that?
Those natural rights, yes, because I would give them to everybody. That's
can't
not
verify
me giving them. I'm saying, but that's like, those are things that again, this is off the cuff. I don't like, those are things I'm fine. Everyone can have that. Those things don't immediately infringe on someone else's right unless you start to qualify them with other things,
Yeah,
But if you,
I would say for me, understanding the origin of those rights came from a Judeo-Christian background. I can accept that without having to fully go down that road to understanding why. I can inherently agree that they are a net good, and I can just operate off of that. I can continue to ask why my entire life, and I might build a completer picture of that for myself. But at the same time, I understand that I recognize that there are certain religions on the planet that don't believe that. And I can inherently look at those and say, well, that's objectively worse than the basis I start from, even in a non-religious aspect. I can understand that, because I think the point you're really trying to drive at, those inherent rights came from a place. And because the people that created that concept of those human rights were some sect of Christianity going back, and that's where those rights came from, within their religious beliefs. But to start from that point that they had already decided was the best point, I don't think is inherently wrong to do that, regardless of whether or not I fully understand where they came from. I can operate I can live my entire life off of those inherent assumptions, because somebody made them before us in that religious context. And I can look at those inherent rights as an objective good. I can operate off the assumption that they came before me, and that's fine. I don't care where they came from, because at this point, that is the best thing I have found to go off of at this point.
And it doesn't invalidate those rights to not seek the
why.
the deep root of them. It doesn't invalidate them. I would see that it maybe makes it intellectually inconsistent, because there isn't a final place. And I would, while I don't love being inconsistent, I would accept that, because it doesn't, at this particular time, I don't have a way to, again, seed language to me. I don't have a way to validate any further than my existence, the existence of those potential roots of that being. That doesn't, for me, invalidate them. It doesn't make them not worth studying. It doesn't make them potentially not the true source of those natural rights. But as far as I can prove, right now, they come from us being human beings, because none of us can agree totally on what ethereal source they come from.
Yeah, I guess, but then relating this back to reality, because if we're gonna say that, like, anytime we make a moral claim or a truth claim or some type of claim, and to an extent, I agree with you. Like, it doesn't come down to just an evidential base. It actually, you have to account for it outside of that, because the perception thing is a huge key.
Account for what?
And like, I keep saying any of this. Oh man, see, this is where I keep brain farting, and it's killing me. Ugh.
To account for the natural right?
Yes. How are you accounting for the natural right? Because what I'm hearing and what it sounds like, you can't verify it, and you just have to assume it, but you can't account for it. And so, because where I would say that gets really dicey, it does get dicey, is because you can't account for it, no one else needs to assume those rights. Right? Like, no, you're saying this is an objective thing that, like, exists no matter human perspective, but you can't account for them. You're just saying it is what it is, and that thus, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. This is just how I'm perceiving your guys' argument.
And I would say that you're not necessarily incorrect, but my response would be neither can you, because you can't prove that that's the root of those rights. That's your perception and interpretation of what the truth of that is. So I don't find your version even to be any more truthful than mine, because no one else can verify anything previous to that point. Verify the way that we can verify. I don't want to do this hashing language thing. You understand what I'm saying? So
yes, this is where I would disagree. Is I think no, we can, because of the tools that we have.
So that's where I asked you before. How can you prove it?
Because reality is a way that it is, and our senses, our faculties are a way that they are, but those can't exist. The reality. So if I draw like a little bit, here's reality. Here's everything. We're all in it. That can't exist, and this gets a little bit into the cosmological argument, unless something outside of it has made it.
And what I'm asking you is, how do you prove what that thing is? Because you saying that it's God doesn't account for the other people who say that it's not. That's what I'm saying to you.
Because the Christian God meets the preconditions necessary, the transcendental element that can even create reality. So that is the argument. It's not so much an argument of, well, here's my proof and here's the evidence for it. Now we can get into, I think, some strong cases there. But I'm saying that, like, if you're just by nature of what it is that gets into circular argumentation, where that's not the transcendental argument for God, isn't that. It's saying, no, there's something outside, transcendental, outside of matter, space, and time, that actually has the authority to create all these things.
And what I'm asking you is how do you prove that that is your Christian God and not someone else's God? How do you validate that?
Okay, so
you're saying that it meets the preconditions. What about a Jewish person who says their God meets the preconditions, or a Muslim person who says the exact same thing? That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
What you're presenting to me is still a subjective interpretation of what that God is giving you.
Because the claims that God makes himself, and then how he shows that throughout history. And so that's where the evidence piece does get important, but we can't even talk about evidence if we don't understand what the nature of reality is, and those base assumptions we have to make, and the assumptions that, like, okay, our senses are giving us some level of reliability to perceive truth. So that's why these two components, I think, are really important. And so why I can disagree
are you talking about evidence like laid out in the Bible?
Yeah, everything from the Bible to just natural, like, revelation to all these things.
So natural revelation, again, is people's perception of what they're going through. And when you're talking about the Bible, again, there's no way to verify, and you can't verify that everything in there is true. So you can't use that as evidence for proof of a higher being when we can't validate the actual legitimacy of those accounts.
So, and to an extent, I think you're right. But again, if you're assuming, okay, that there is this, that there, it ultimately comes down to your base assumptions. Like, and then how does that correspond?
Correct. That's exactly what I'm saying.
How that corresponds in reality. Why I can't align with like your point of view of like, oh, we just have these rights, but they're unaccounted for, is because, well, there's plenty of people that don't believe that and think that, and they don't actually act in the way that I think would logically would extend from that view, right? Because people are infringing upon these rights all the time.
Not everyone believes what I believe. Not everyone believes what I believe.
Why is that where I'm not connecting the dots with your view is then I don't understand how that's inherently wrong or immoral.
What?
Like the infringements of these rights, but if other people just don't perceive those rights, then in their view, they're not being immoral. They're just extending their desires and extending their rights. Now we keep talking about rights, but I think when we're talking about rights, there's this objective nature to it, and this grounding that you're saying, oh, we all have, but again, that's just a claim.
And again, you are confusing natural rights with egoistic rights. You start talking about people creating their own rights, and then how are we not infringing on other people? You are conflating the two things, and I don't. So maybe I'm not conflating because I don't think you're doing it intentionally, but you're bridging these two gaps in the middle of the conversation that I'm not doing.
But like you've pointed out, you're just saying, hey, we have these natural rights.
Right. The same way that you're just saying Jesus is here and he is the outside being that it fits the conditions for all of these things. That's the same thing. Our claims are the same thing. You just feel that yours is based in evidence in the Bible, and I would not say that that's the case. So I don't see what the inherent difference is in your justification and mine.
The base assumption would, the base assumption of assuming there has to be something outside of reality for reality to exist seems just as, if not more so, it's just as hard to follow, if not more so, than just assuming that we are here so we'd have natural rights. Like making the assumption that there has to be something outside of reality it's a bigger leap for me to get over than it is just the fact that we do exist.
Well, so this is where it gets in that continuity thing, like, because if you don't agree with that position, then I would say you are objectively up and running into the law of cause and effect.
What do you mean?
Right? So like if you're saying, no, we just exist. So let's make our way back to us existing. What was necessary for you to exist?
Science stuff.
Yeah, I don't
know.
What are you getting at?
Yeah.
Like my point is that, okay, there's this origin, this ultimate origin, the singularity.
Okay.
Like, there's the scientific community
people like to call it the Big Bang or whatever.
Yeah. So that's where I think this ultimately jumps back into like the cosmological argument to an extent, is like that's a massive logical error on our part if we don't assume that something has to precede our reality.
I don't assume that. Like I said, I am not saying that it doesn't. But for me, the Big Bang does not directly relate to my ability, my rights here in 2022. And I would never say, and I have always held from the time that I was a child, I don't think that the Big Bang and Jesus are mutually exclusive. I don't think there's any reason to think that there couldn't be God, right? I don't think there's any reason to believe that God couldn't be there and be the source of the Big Bang. No one fucking knows. The Big Bang, all that shit is also an assumption. I don't cede everything to scientists into natural scientific law the way that they've explained it. I don't align myself solely with evolution or solely with religion, because no one can actually prove both of those things are correct. So I don't believe religion any more than I believe whatever this hardcore evolutionary theory is, because they also don't know that.
But you believe what you believe, right?
What do you mean?
That sounds like a confusing question, but like you are grounding, you're believing in something. You have faith in something.
That you exist.
That I exist.
Okay. So, but at least what I'm hearing, you've already admitted that there is no way of me truly knowing that. And so I have.
I don't need to justify my
No,
existence
I don't
to know
need-
that
no,
I
no.
exist. That's
No,
I
and
think
I'm
the
not,
assumption.
I'm not claiming that you need to like justify it in that sense, but I'm just.
And
saying
I've
that,
also
like,
never said that God couldn't be the source of that. I said that
and
me,
I make that claim.
and
No.
what I'm saying so I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no. I just want to make sure that I claim that somewhere to where I was trying to give out that sense.
Okay.
No, I don't believe so. It's just we're operating off. We're just operating off of two different starting points. We're operating the fact that we do exist, and then we can argue all day how or why or whether or not we should or if we even do. But I am here right now, and I know that I do exist. So I'm going to operate off of that assumption.
As we're sitting here having this conversation, we're all acknowledging, at the very least, we're all acknowledging the coexistence of each other in this conversation. So I can verify this through deductive reasoning within this situation that I exist because we're all acknowledging my existence. Colin is talking to me, you're looking at me, you're talking to me. I can deduce that. That's good enough for me. That doesn't mean that Jesus isn't the root of that or God isn't the root of that. But I don't think that me not immediately accepting or promoting that is the case invalidates the rights that I assume that could be based in that.
Okay. So, and that's the tie I'm trying to make, is that ultimately the assumptions that we need to have to perceive and have these conversations have to be rooted in God. And if it's not rooted in something transcendental, well, I'll finish my thought and then we can unpack it, is it has to be transcendental and completely outside of our context to be truly objective and instilled. And that
I'm not sure what I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Okay.
What has to be outside of us to be truly objective?
God, God.
Okay,
Yahweh,
so that gets.
God in the Bible.
So God has to exist for us to justify our existence?
Yes.
I think but that's your perception. That's not, you can't come in and say this is it. This is the answer. Because again, you can't account for the other people that may have arrived at the exact same base of points that you do with a different God. Your theory doesn't account for that because you're saying it fits the predetermined measures. Again, so would a Jew and so would a Muslim. You don't have any way to validate that. And we, by our assumption, our assertion that we as human beings have rights, are not invalidating anybody else's assumption or assertion that they come from somewhere else. Your assertion that they have to does in fact invalidate our rights as human natural rights because they don't come from somewhere else. That to me is immoral. You're asking me to justify my existence outside of the existence of God, which I find immoral. I'm a human being. We can prove this. You can't prove that God exists. I'm not asking you to justify the existence of God, just like you can't ask me to justify my existence as a human being outside of that.
No, because that's the thing is you keep saying I can verify that I have rights to these, but that's ultimately an assumption. And so like my argument with like a Muslim,
just that the third being would be God, and that's what I'm saying to you is that these assumptions are the same thing, but mine doesn't invalidate yours invalidates mine, which is immoral.
No, but that you have to assume that's immoral.
Right? I guess by the same way that I'm assuming we all have natural rights, but
but you're assuming these natural rights. You're assuming some standard because you're making a moral claim of, that's immoral.
And you have to assume that there is a higher power outside of that because you can't prove it. That's what I'm saying to you. Our assumptions are the same. You have a formula that yours fits that you think breaks down easier.
Leading to us even having conflict.
I'm sorry, what?
Like our inherent assumptions is actually what's leading to us even having conflict. Because you're pointing out that in the naturalistic rights, we just have these rights and I'm claiming we have these rights, but it's you doing the claiming, right?
Okay.
So but that's you taking the tools that you have, thought, looking out into the universe and saying, this is what I'm seeing from that universe. And so this is what I think is true.
Okay.
What I'm trying to point out is that is ultimately you're grounding that in your perception. Right. And I get the point you're trying to point back to me of like, well, you're just doing the same thing. You're just doing the same thing.
Then how am I wrong and you're not? That's what I'm getting at. Is that how am I incorrect if you are doing the exact same thing from maybe one step before, also can't validate it any more than I can. It's just as big of an assumption as I'm making, but if not maybe a bigger claim, but I'm wrong and you're not. When the assertion that I'm making doesn't invalidate your right or existence of being, but yours invalidates mine. How are you right in that? How?
So I don't know if invalidate is the word that I would use. I'm just saying you're not taking it to that one extra step if you're not grounding it in anything. You're just
I am. I'm grounding it in our existence as human beings.
You can't prove we exist.
And you can't. Right. We all agree that we exist. We just seeded that. I'm not going to validate my existence to you. Just like I don't ask anybody else to validate the fact that they exist. I don't prove to me that you exist. I don't. That's crazy. That's crazy. Why would I do that to anybody?
Well, okay, so I could ask an interesting question. So where I think
what? Ask whatever you want. I don't. You're not. The answer is not there. I'm not invalidating anybody else. So I don't.
Well, why is that important?
For other people to be able to have those natural rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Why is it important that like you invalidate or validating anything?
In my everyday life, it doesn't. I don't care what your perception of my rights are. In this conversation in which you are asserting this is the way that things are, that matters. Because if this ideology becomes dominant and takes control of other people, you're going to be foregoing other people's rights because they don't align with your ideology, which is wrong.
Okay.
Morally wrong because it infringes on other people's base human rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because you don't agree with the way that they perceive it, where they come from.
Yes, but like your view of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and what my view of that, and especially the context that was even given in, is completely different and is being accounted for and grounded very differently than how you're applying it.
How?
Because the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, especially as given through the founding fathers, all makes its large ties, like John Locke, like you just pointed, great guy. They are all operating out of a Christian worldview, and so they have their assumptions assume human dignity, but as a basis of God giving those things.
And that's fine. I am not saying that they are incorrect. I am saying I don't venture into those intellectual steps because I can't prove it I can prove it even to a lesser degree than the fact that I exist. I have never said that those things are not correct. I've never said that that isn't true, right? So I don't understand what your point is when that doesn't invalidate what I'm saying because I'm not ceding it to the right that they ceded it to. They could be fucking wrong. They could be totally wrong, but like, arrive at the correct conclusion.
What human rights was dictated by what God had done and said, and they assumed was right.
And that's fine. So I agree with their interpretation of natural rights. They might be wrong about the root of that. That's what I'm saying to you.
Okay, but then you are in, like, especially on the case of rights, like that's where that huge and different thing is. So what you and I are going to say is right. So like and we don't need to jump huge into this, but on like the case of abortion, that's why this is such a massive issue, is because on the case of someone who is pro-life, they view that as a human life, and that they have inherent
certainly
inherent rights.
Certainly.
Whereas, and I think there's a safe assumption there as well that life wants to live.
Certainly.
Right. So, but then when that comes into the
hence the life of
a woman, right, who is pro-choice, and if we're making the assumption that okay, this is life wants to continue to live, and that this is a person by the best faculties that we have using the scientific method. We can tell it's a human DNA at conception. Everything is human is there. And so we can to some degree of confidence say this thing is human and it's alive.
Okay.
So and maybe we agree on this. I didn't hear on the earlier portion on the show. Is then does that woman have the right to end that other human's life?
And we've had this discussion numerous times on this show. We don't disagree with you, but it's also you're also extrapolating something to a modern day application, which is not really what we're doing. You know?
Well, but again, like then, so would you? Okay. That's not even modern day though, because I mean we have forms of abortion that go back.
I
thousands
understand that,
of
but
years.
we're dealing with the issue right now. I'm not saying that it's not a relevant issue, but the way that it's being decided now, that this is a modern issue now, because we can't change how it was done in the 1920s. We can change how it's done now. I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. I don't really want to get far into this because we've had this discussion dozens of times on this show. I don't disagree with you. I am torn on a daily basis when we talk about this between the woman's right to choose what she does with her body and the fact that I know that that's a baby. I've had 2 children. My wife has brought 2 children into the world myself. I've seen the process. I don't disagree with you. It is an issue in people's rights that we have discussed here, like I said, dozens of times, when whose rights supersede whose. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know. And I don't think anybody else does either. So again, I don't disagree with you, but I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not really what we're talking about.
Like, I don't see how that view is actually one, and not that I'm grounding this just in like a utilitarian sense, how that is helpful and how we actually like can view that as right or wrong.
Again, this is a separate issue that I don't want to get into because it's aside from the conversation that we're having here. We can talk about abortion another day. Again, for at least the 3rd time, I don't disagree with you on abortion. I don't disagree with you. I don't want to hash this conversation out when we're trying to figure something else out.
Yeah, we still haven't even nailed down whether or not I can justify my own existence because I don't believe in your God.
Say it one more time. Sorry.
The conversation we're having right now is whether or not I can validate my own existence right now without believing that your God gave me the ability to recognize my own existence, even though I can recognize my existence now. That's the conversation we're still having. We haven't gotten anywhere past that. Tying it to abortion right now, that's levels above where we haven't even found truth yet.
Yes. Okay. So this is where I'm thinking I'm just at my limits as it pertains to the conversation, and to be honest, I am a little lost, and I'm trying to get back to that main question, and where I think I need to. That's why I wanted to write down your question, and so if I can give a response on a later show, you can get more fleshed out. I think
it seems like the answer you gave at least was through the Bible, and I don't find that to be a valid justification for why your religion is correct and other people's is not, because again, we can't corroborate the things that are in that book. So I don't find that to be evidence enough to say that someone else's religion is wrong and that God and Jesus should be the basis of natural right. I don't.
Yeah, and like I think I could give like a strong evidential argument to this. Like, yes, there's nothing that's going to like 100% like, oh, that's fully verifiable. But I think what the Bible ultimately purveys about the nature of God, the nature of man, and then just like ultimately why reality is, best corresponds to the truth, or best corresponds to what is I'm actually seeing and perceiving out there.
Based on your perception.
Well, but that those perceptions and things and those assumptions come from somewhere.
But it's also your interpretation of the Bible, and there are dozens of other religions that use the exact same Bible that find a different ending point that you do.
Totally, but I think that's where it would ultimately come down to, okay, what methods are they using to interpret? And then does that actually correspond with the claims that God makes? So like in the case of, and again, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but when you look at the claims that God makes, especially about his covenantal nature with people, okay, well, if you begin to make certain claims counter to what you see in the Bible and it's not harmonizing, then you can say, okay, well, that's not consistent with what the Bible's showing.
So because you're basing this in the Bible, though, and what I'm saying to you is that you can't validate the truth in that. There is no way to validate the validity of those events that happened in that book. And I'm not trying to offend you. I'm trying to speak about this in the most, like in the level that you're talking about. At the base, human beings wrote those books. There is no way to say that what they wrote is the truth. So you can't use that as evidence to prove that you're correct when we can't prove that that's even true.
Well, again, because like, are we saying that like I can't? Are you saying I can't provide evidence in support of that, or just like are we still using the way to verify of like
You're still
there's no
operating-
way to truly hold
You're
it out?
operating under the assumption that the events that happen in the Bible are correct, and that other people's interpretations of the book is not correct, and and you can't prove that. I think it's weird the focus on what proof and validate means. This feels like a misnomer to me. I feel like you understand what I'm getting at.
But no, I want to understand like what are you meaning like by validation of like I can't.
No one on the earth now can prove that those events happened in the Bible, as written in that book. No one can prove that.
Again, are we saying validate as in to 100% certainty?
Yes, because you are making a claim that other people's religions are invalid and that our existence is invalid without the acceptance of your religion that you can't validate.
Okay, so now this is where I'd ultimately come back to, like, we can't validate anything unless we have these base assumptions that we make, but we have to
based
account
in
for
your
those.
religion, though. And so you can't frame the whole world based on how your religion views things. You don't get to limit the, what do they call it, the fucking window. You don't get to move the window like that. That's not how it works. We don't only have a discussion
I'm not
based
moving
in your
the window.
framework.
I'm saying that's the window, and that's exactly how it is.
That's your interpretation of it. That's what I'm saying to you. You're interpreting that. That's your subjective interpretation, and that's what you've said in your explanation.
No, I'm saying that like what. No, I'm saying that is how it is, and that we actually have to be given the tools to even see how something is, or else, yes, it is truly, all of it is subjective. But if it is truly subjective, then there is no way to, like you said, verify that we even have human rights.
And that comes back to the point of you can't. We don't know that that's correct. You have to be given something. That's an assertion being made by you.
Yes, it does have to be given. Okay. So this is where I think we just keep running back into, and I'm not equipped at this time to like really like give the final twist of like, oh, okay, here it is, and that's on me. I apologize.
Because I don't see there's a way to prove that any God gives you these things. That's, again, you're proving a pre-existence to the life that we live here on Earth, which I don't see how you can do. You're making assertions and then saying that I'm making assertions, which invalidates what I'm saying, but everything you're saying is based on an assertion and an assumption. They are not inherently different, because yours is one step behind where mine is, because you still can't prove it. And that's the issue I'm having, is that what I'm positing doesn't invalidate what you're saying. It leaves completely open the door for it to exist and for you to be correct. What you're positing is that I am incorrect, which I find that my existence cannot even be validated without your basing it on your pre-assumption, which is immoral. I don't understand that. Like, that's what I don't get. And we can do the circular moral thing and existence thing all fucking day. No one can prove that. No one can prove that we exist. Like I said, we accept that. But that's a whole nother discussion, man. Outside, like.
Okay. So like that to me is like the key pin here that I need to get. And again, like, first time doing something like this, it is just like, whoo, it's a lot. But if I can get the key to ultimately get your response, because you're asking like, how do you prove that your view, how do you prove that my position is correct and someone else's isn't? And that's your base question, right?
As far as your religious basis for it.
Okay.
Not just your position, because we're going back and forth all the time, and I still don't feel like you're correct as far as your base supposition of the three things, the triad that we need to hit for us to have a conversation, because that at its core is that basis of religion, which that's what I'm asking you to validate. You're saying it's based in your interpretation of the Bible, which is what tells you these things because it meets the preconditions for it. And what I'm saying is you can't prove that any more than somebody else can, because it's based off of your interpretation of the Bible, which is, again, a piece that we can't validate.
Well, then I guess the quick response to that was like, well, if you are assuming or making claims, anyways, I don't want to get more tongue twisted, because I at least, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're just getting into like coming back and the butting heads of things. And so I don't know how valuable that's going to be for our continued conversation and for people listening. So at least what I'm seeing, like, of what I need to bring back, and what I would hope is, even if I'm not allowed back here, but I can get a response to you guys of like, here's to the question that you're asking. Here's actually, like, after I've sat down, looked at it. Oh, okay. Make sure I'm understanding your question, your position. This is my response back. Which sadly, I just can't give off the cuff right now. And it's not like oh man. Yeah, I'm brain farting. And that's just not me.
And that's all right.
I know that's hard on show where it's like, oh man, we're here to debate and like establish and hopefully come to some conclusion of truth. But that's just, I think I'm at just the limit of my performance, sadly. And
that's fine. I mean, we can wrap up the segment now. I'm not gonna lie, I gotta pee really bad.
Yeah, that's fine.
We could do that. So yeah, we'll go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back with part 4.
Part 4, yes. So just stick around for part 4, Jake.
Yeah, so I have until 7 or 6 for your guys' time. Will that work?
That's up to you. We'll be here longer than that, so that's up to you if you want to stick around and cut out halfway, or if you want to say goodbye now. I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm looking at part 4.
It's like our grab bag
just
segment.
A grab bag segment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's. Yeah, I'd love to be on for the last 30 minutes if that's all good.
We can do that.
There.
All right. Well, for all of you fine people watching and listening, we will be back in a few minutes.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat.